Los Angeles Lakers, their vitals are they don't have any vitals, but for real, their key free agents. You could boil it down. Malik Monk is the most important one. He's non-bird. Carmelo Anthony is also non-bird, and then Austin Reeves has a 1.6 million non-guarantee that I am going to guess if they haven't guaranteed it already, which I haven't seen per reporting, they will. So really just Monk and Anthony. I think even Anthony's more replaceable, but I felt like his season was not underappreciated, but he was not part of the issue in LA. He did exactly what they would have needed him to do. They just had no idea what the fuck they were doing overall. They do have a Marc Gasol trade exception worth 2.7 million, which I'm only noting that because they're so limited in what they could spend. Like if there's an opportunity to go out there and get a player who fits into that, you should in theory use it, but the Lakers are a poor ass franchise that might not. Their best spending tool overall is that mid-level exception. And the question looming over all of this, it doesn't need to be the first on point, is will they trade Russell Westbrook, or would you include a first round pick or two to do so? Is there even a scenario in which you attach to first him and get someone back? But what are you really looking at? And they need almost everything. I think they could use supplementary ball handling still. I think their biggest needs are just complementary defense and shooters, because that's how you're supposed to build a team around LeBron and AD, contrary to what the Lakers did this last offseason.
Yeah, I mean, like my overarching thought is that, and this will never happen because I think, most of that front office is probably tied to the length of LeBron James' tenure and Anthony Davis. But I'm trading both of those guys. I'm blowing the whole thing up. This is beyond the scope of a free agent, look ahead. But like, if you hit home runs on let's say you sign guys that are, you do as well as say the Warriors did with your minimums, right? Mm-hmm. You find Peyton, Porter, Bjelica, you got three, you hit three bombs with your minimum guys, and these are rotation players now. Like that's still not, you still have one of the worst rosters after your top two players in the league. So I would try to trade Wilson, but so if we're not going to blow it up, so I guess, yes, you've got to throw your first round pick in there with THT and none, and try to move Westbrook for whatever. I guess, but realistically, he's going to be on this roster because there's no positive value trade from another team's perspective. I don't think that would take him on. So you have to absolutely nail the mini mid-level signing, which I think they'll use it. Like you just sort of have to. It's, even though, as you said, they're not one of the, big spendy franchises, despite being in LA, they're like a family operation. There's no Microsoft money behind the Lakers.
And by the way, you need to get away from that, where the teams can no longer be like, that's their sole source of income, basically, because then you have situations where the Lakers are applying for a government-backed small business.
Got to get that PPP. Yeah, forget the mom and pop hardware store around the corner. The Lakers need help. I don't know, they need everything. So where do you even start? So what I was looking at for just say the mini mid-level, like Bryn Forbes, because you just need someone that's going to make shots and run around. How bleak is that? If you want to on minimums, I like someone like Joe Ingles, where you might get like a couple months at the end of the season out of him, and then he's able to make shots and distribute a little bit in the playoffs if you make it. That's the other thing. You can't just necessarily operate like we got to be ready for April and May, so we'll take some risks on like Rubio or Ingles or whoever else is not going to be a full season player, because you just won't make it in the West. So they're over a barrel. Like, what are you going to go? Damian Lee would start for them. Can you get him for the minimum? PJ Dozier is another injured guy that maybe you throw him out there and he can be like a seventh guy. I don't know. I would love to hear if you have better suggestions than I do, because mine all suck.
I approach it like this: is who do I think the best free agent they could realistically sign was, or level of free agent they could realistically sign? Malik Monk is actually probably their ceiling. Non-Bird, though, I don't think they're going to use their mini mid-level to keep him. And so if he's back, I'm calling shenanigans like with Nick Batum and the Clippers, to where there was that wink, wink, oh, we'll pay you when you have your early bird rights. But aside from Monk, I think you're looking at a Gary Harris or a Taurean Prince or an Otto Porter Jr. That is the ceiling of guys that I could see. If you're throwing your entire mini MLE at them, they'll take it. I think more realistically than that, you mentioned Damian Lee was a name that sprung to mind, as those guys they have distressed value or undefined value. Can you get minimum and they're very plug and play at both ends. Can you pay them and just slot them here? And look, some of the names that are being mentioned for the Lakers, like they're not like realistic because of just what they could spend. You could loop TJ Warren in here if you wanted as well. Just, I don't know what his market's going to be like, but if I'm Indy, I'm willing to keep him if all he's getting is the mini MLE. So something that's related to this though, is there have been reports that Kyrie has told the Nets he would sign for the MLE with the Lakers. And I guess if I go back and forth because Kyrie Irving is just notoriously full of shit. Mm-hmm. So like, he's a disinformation like believer. So I wouldn't believe what he's saying. That being said, like that is their, like if that is their saving grace. If they luck into something like that, where there's a player that really forces his way there to where maybe you could even move Russell Westbrook. I'm just, given how in the now NBA teams focus, even if you attached 2027, 2029, and then swaps in 26 and 28 to Russ, like, is there even a team that will give you a player back for him? Because yes, it's an expiring contract, but it's $47.5 million.
Yeah. I know your question's rhetorical. That's I think, so the Kyrie thing, just to touch on that, like that's the simplest explanation is that is a pure leverage play. That's not like a novel. Like
I would be like, I dare you to, I'm not a big fan of teams calling players bluff, but Kyrie Irving is like the biggest cartoon ass person in the league. So just, I would be, yeah, go ahead. You take the mini MLE from Los Angeles. Maybe they could get, look, if they get rid of THT, none, you open scenarios where you could give him the full non-taxpayer, but like that's 10 plus million. Kyrie's never been, even before the whole COVID stuff, eminently available. So like, if you're him, you have to want to lock down some form of long-term money. Yes. You also lost your Nike, like signature shoe deal or signature shoe, whatever it is. So that had to cost you money. And I think he lost like 15 plus million in salary last year. That has to matter even to him.
And I think just as like a macro point, it's so appropriate that like the best way forward for the Lakers is some star just deciding against most logic that he wants to be there, because that's like the only way that they've built anything in the post-Kobe era, right? Like LeBron decided to be a Laker. That's how you get Anthony Davis. That's how you get a bunch of other guys. Like that's how they're good or were good. And so just banking on another guy doing that is so on brand and perfect. And so it really, what it does is it masks, like in most of LeBron's tenure, the front office has just totally stepped in it. Like just the decisions have never made sense. So like, of course their best way forward is just like, essentially someone still believes in Lakers exceptionalism and wants to be there. Like that's the reality. Like approaching free agency in a normal fashion, just like, you're not going to get anything. That's just, they don't have the assets. That's just what it is.
Yeah. And it's just like, even some of the minimum, like guys who might be available for the minimum, like a Dwayne Dedmon is a backup 5. Or I guess they would play him next to Anthony Davis, knowing how the Lakers like to roll. So I feel like it has to be an eventful summer for them. They have more than half their roster spots to fill at this point. I think they did a nice job with who they drafted at number 35. They now have Scottie Pippen Jr. and Shareef O'Neal, or whatever his name is, Shaq's son. So they're still recruiting or going after the big names in that way. But I don't know what to expect from them this offseason. If they're not willing to include a first round pick in a rush trade, though, my response is Russell Westbrook will be a Laker next season.
Yeah. I think that's the most likely outcome.
I'm with you.
It would have happened by now if it was going to happen.
Is Kyrie wearing a Lakers jersey next season? Yes or no? No justification, just yes or no.
No.